Yeah. So MWED has been around for 25 years now, and I wanted to take some time to talk with some of you who were there from the beginning and the early days, just about what prompted you to start the organization and what the Valley looked like at that time, and just tell me a little bit about the formation of Jobs Now, which is now known as Montana West Economic Development.
Right. Well, my recollection is that we had a meeting with Hagedorn Enterprises, sponsored it from Spokane, about economic development. And the Valley had several different economic development organizations, but they were all separate and they were kind of competing with one another. So the idea was to try and create a valley-wide economic development entity that would work with the entire valley instead of kind of having different cities competing or putting one down so another one could grow type of thing to even things out. And we wanted a representation around the valley. And I was president of First Citizens Bank at the time in Columbia Falls, and Jeannie Lucky, and I can't remember who the person was from Hagedorn, the Daily Interlake. They were kind of the impetus to get us started. And I remember we had a meeting here in Kalispell that they invited everybody and then had some speakers talk about economic development and how it had worked in the Coeur d'Alene area and Bend, Oregon. So we took from there and started Jobs Now. And as we did Jobs Now as a private entity, and we then formed the Port Authority because we needed different mechanisms for different types of economic development. So the Jobs Now entity was the private part, and at the beginning what we would do is try and solicit CEOs and companies from around the country to try and get them to locate their businesses here. So we had money in the budget for meals and entertainment, to take them out to dinner, those type of things. And that was the private part that we could do, and we couldn't really do that with the public part. So with the Port Authority, we formed that right away, and so it just worked together, because then it was a public-private partnership. And the Port Authority had certain capabilities like bonding, things like that Jobs Now would not have. And then there was things the Port Authority could do, and there's things that the Jobs Now could do. And we just kind of would mesh between the two to figure out how we would put deals together.
And oddly enough, I got here because the organization had gone through a couple of failed searches. You had a CEO that came for a very short time. You'd hired somebody that wound up not coming. And it turned out one of the board members, Turner Askew, knew a firm in North Carolina called Lincoln Goforth that were very good friends with Bob Potter, who was running Jobs Plus, which was the organization in Coeur d'Alene. And so they called Bob Potter and said, gosh, who should let's hire a search firm. And so they hired Lincoln Goforth. Well, I was working across the hall from Mr. Goforth's son, who was our economic developer. And they called me up and said, don't you vacation out west? We've got this funny thing out in Montana. Do you want to go check it out? So oddly enough, that's how I got here. And the first weekend I was in Montana, I actually drove to Coeur d'Alene, visited with Bob Potter, and the difference was it was 100% focused on private investment over time. It was, and that's always been my working definition of economic development: effective public-private partnerships for sustaining private investment. That's the magic key, because private investment is very market-driven, and it was a very different, actually, operating paradigm than anybody here had done. And I loved this group of people because they were really, they were very much against the tide of Montana, which has always been, more grants, more public money, really looking at doing that. So I think over the 25 years, that's one of the things that this organization has done an incredible job with, is looking at the new private investment that's in the Valley. And I sort of broke off and got more interested in sort of just the straight equity capital piece of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the reason that it's Jobs Now, but we had issues because at the time there was a lot of unemployment
Yeah.
in the area, and that's part of what we're trying to do, but people would come to the office looking for a job. So that's why we changed the name to Montana West Economic Development, to try and better portray what our mission was. And then with the Port Authority, one of the very first home runs that we hit was landing stream at the mall. And so we were able to do that in cooperation with the Flathead County Commissioners, because we got a loan through the Montana Board of Investments. But in order for that loan to be approved or to go through, the county had to commit to at least 10 years of providing the Port Authority with a 2% or 2 mil levy. And that's what would be used, to back up the ability to repay the loan. And that's when we bought 50 or 60,000 square feet.
60 and change. Yeah.
Yes. And we did that in cooperation with the city of Kalispell. So the Jobs Now, Port Authority, Flathead County, and city of Kalispell all worked together, it was great. And it brought in 400 jobs.
Oh yeah, and at one point they were up to 900. And if I have to look back over 25 years, for me, my overarching objective would be to have the valley move from survival to a success mentality, because there was very much a survival mentality. Wages were terribly low, unemployment was high, and what Stream did, and of course there were people who loved it when they left. They were, oh, that's not going to work. Well, we were able to recruit actually a better firm, I think, into their teletech, which was there almost 20 years, and de facto became a workforce development training center for our valley, because everybody who came in the door there learned customer service, they learned software skills, they learned how to work at a computer, work remotely. They had health care, they had continuing education benefits, and child care. And, it was a population, most of which had never touched a keyboard until they went to Teletech or Stream. And they were a great tenant for us for a really long time. And, Christy and I have talked, we think there's another life for that space for the next 20 years. And, I think we're doing some conversations in the community about what that looks like.
Yeah. The other thing that we had some complaints to start with, because people like receptionists or people that worked in like a real estate office, they were quitting and going to Teletech. So that was kind of a complaint to start with, but it turned out to be beneficial for everybody, because like Liz mentioned, they had a very stringent and consistent training program for people, so they could learn all of these computer skills, interpersonal skills, customer service skills. So the level of professionalism in the valley actually increased. So that was a good thing.
And one of my favorite things too is somebody who started there as an agent. Tori wound up as the manager there, making mid six figures, a really good salary. She grew up in Columbia Falls, and that's just great opportunity. That's exactly what we want to see happen.
Yeah, that was definitely a long-lasting project that lasted, like you said, almost the extent of the last 25 years. What other projects do you remember as being significant, or ones that you particularly are proud of or were excited about at the time?
Well, I have two I'd love to talk about. One of them obviously would be Resource Label Group,
Total
which is
Label?
Total Label USA now, which was located outside of Whitefish. Very cutting edge technology with label printing. Average wages were like $90,000. Just a great company for the Flathead, because they printed labels, which are small and can be put in package. That's kind of always been one of our bones here, is the difficulty of shipping large and heavy things. And most people don't know this, but in an odd way, what I'm doing today at Two Bear Capital began from a project at Montana West. When Google was looking for a data center, we had taken an option on the Columbia Falls Industrial Park, and Mark Kwame, who at that time was at Sequoia Capital, we were very much on the short list for a Google data center. And I mean, we got so far as to, they sent their engineers out, but Quincy, Washington already had a paid for dam, and whatever we could do in terms of utility costs, they were always going to be cheaper. Plus, we found out we had a small earthquake fault, wasn't a big deal, and in the long run, that wouldn't have been a terrific project. It doesn't really create a lot of jobs. I mean, there are electrician kinds of jobs, but it is a big capital input into a community, so it would have increased the tax base. But Mark Kwame was talking about this project all the time at Sequoia. So Mike Gogan, who I work for now, said, oh yeah, I should go look at whitefish. So in a funny way, the threads, have woven some great fabric for us over time.
Yeah, and I remember at the Port Authority, we were saving money and accumulating money because just feel like, luck is preparation meets opportunity.
Absolutely.
So we were preparing. We didn't know what was going to pop up on the table, but we were constantly working at trying to find something, but at the same time saving money. Mm-hmm. And I remember with Total Label, it was right at the cutting edge of whether they were going to come here or not. And the road that led to their property was gravel. And the machines that they had, this is quite a while ago, were $1 million a piece. Mm-hmm. And, just one little speck of dust destroys the machine. So they were requiring that road be paved.
That's right.
Or they weren't coming here. And they needed an answer right away. So the Port Authority was able to go, okay, county, will you pave this road? And they couldn't say if they would or wouldn't, but we needed an answer. So the Port Authority stepped up and said to Don, we'll pave the road if the county doesn't.
Yeah.
But it turns out that the county did. And that was one of the fun things, is that to have the whole community and different aspects of the community working together, pulling together to get this accomplished. And that's one of the things I'm most proud of, is the fact that we were able to pull different public-private entities together on a common goal that benefits the entire valley.
And the other thing I really loved about both this founding group were you were really long-term thinkers. And in fact, it's interesting, the money that you were able to leverage for the rail park all started way back when. And we were frugal, and lots of people tried to get their hands on that money for things that we didn't think were good. And actually, we were criticized for banking money. But you've got to prepare, and that match would have never been there if we hadn't really been looking for a long-term project. I mean, 20 years is a short horizon, actually.
I served as chairman of the Port Authority for the first 15 years. And that's what my goal was to try and save in case something popped up. And I did get criticized for that, but in the long run and looking back, I'm proud of what we did. I'm happy that we did it the way that we did. Like this, taking the tracks out of Kalispell, in my opinion, is going to be a game changer. I think it's going to really reinvigorate Kalispell. And I'm from Columbia Falls, but that's cool. If Kalispell does well, Columbia Falls does well, Whitefish does well, Big Fork, Lakeside, and that's the thing that I'm the most proud of, is creating an entity that benefits the entire valley, not just Kalispell, not just Whitefish or whatever.
Yeah, the valley is definitely interconnected. I think probably more so than ever with the influx of new people. So how do you see the economic development work here in the valley having changed over the last couple of decades? I mean, the valley has grown exponentially. There's new people, there's new money. What do you see as a big change from the late 90s to now?
Yeah, I remember when we first started, a large part of our budget would be this travel and entertainment kind of thing to try and attract CEOs, or find CEOs that maybe had a place on Flathead Lake and try and lure them to try and bring their business here. And then it kind of transformed into more specific type of marketing and pulling out, databases and trying to mail out to people and send them advertisements and pictures of the valley. And then it's transformed from there into, more of a web-based approach. So it's, it was important for us to develop a great web page to try and lure people that way and put up all kinds of statistics that anybody looking to move a facility here, like, what are the taxes, what are the schools like, what's the crime, all of those things, and what properties are available for sale, those type of things. So it's just kind of progressed, I think, very favorably, and we've got very professional people running the organization now. I think we have a very good reputation, and I'm proud to be a part of it.
And I think the next 20 years will be very much about managing growth so that we don't kill our golden goose. Because the day I got a computer and could move to the Valley, I did move to the Valley, and lots of people have followed. I mean, the change in remote work and distributed workforce is just a huge boon for us because, we started seeing data early on that national parks are like a magic draw. I think the first 20 years there was a lot of infrastructure needs that needed to be done. I mean, just some basic planning, water, sewer, bandwidth, and that'll we'll continue to need that and work together. Getting the bypass done was a very big long-term project. But I think the next 20 years are all about workforce. And I think the community college, while it's always played a central role, become increasingly more important to training the workforce of the future. I'm very interested in growing a sector that is nascent here now, which is biotech. I love what we're planning in Whitefish, but that's going to take that's another 20-year haul. The biggest change that I see though is the new private investment in the Valley, and not just in the Valley but in the state. When I moved here in 2000, there was 0 private equity invested in Montana. This year there was over $2 billion. And that's pretty astounding. And just the blurring of lines, again, when when the technology takes the constraints off geography is all that matters, and we have pretty great geography. So I think the next 20 years are about making sure that stays so, and workforce, because STEM education, we have got to do better, particularly in our rural schools, with access to all kinds of education and technology. Technology is not going away.
Yeah, and the economy has changed so much.
Yes.
When we started, CFAC was a big player.
Mm-hmm.
Plum Creek was a big player with all their plants. CFAC's gone. Plum Creek's, now Weyerhaeuser, and they've trimmed down the number of plants that they have. And we've just seen more and more tourism, which exposed people to the area more, and then people that want to live here. Another big impetus that we helped promote was, bandwidth, like Liz was talking about, to get better, faster, more reliable internet throughout the valley, which will then allow people to work remotely, to establish businesses that are dependent upon web-based type applications. So that was another thing, and I think the Valley still today is making pretty good progress on expanding the bandwidth and the ability to have very fast internet connections. So.
And the diversity of the economy here is incredibly different. It was highly cyclical, based on 1 or 2 industries and real estate. And real estate's always going to be cyclical. I mean, it just is. But I think we're much better buffered against that right now than we were.
Right. And like you mentioned earlier, Liz, one of the constraints that we have here in the Flathead Valley is we don't have an interstate. So that makes it difficult, for, bulky type products to be shipped in and out. So that's where it was more important, we felt, to have great internet so that people could do business here without an interstate.
Now I love that we don't have an interstate.
Right.
I just kind of love that we didn't have one. I could see that down the road because, I remember taking when we really did our first big private fundraiser, raised $1 million, which seemed, this organization had about $68,000 in the bank when I moved here. And I remember when we announced our first $1 million, I made everybody go to Rebecca Farm because I said, okay, these are the kind of places that, they're flying in horses. And that just seemed like, okay, not really, but, it's an incredible place to live. But at the end of the day, it's all about the people that live here and the values of hard work, sustainability, help your neighbor. I mean, I look at Don, his new bank, or it's not new anymore, but, all the things that they've done in the community, people are very community-minded in it. Of all the things that we need in this country, it's people who love and invest and care about their community. And I think that's the hallmark of Montana West and of this valley. And that's the most important thing to preserve.
Yeah, and one of the thoughts that I have for the next 20 years would be to work very hard on maintaining our core values as a community, as a neighbor, as individuals, professionals.
Totally.
So that if, as an example, if there was people tagging a bunch of buildings or something like that in Columbia Falls or whatever, I would be the first one to put up the money to find them, catch them, clean it up, and just don't let it start. I think is important.
And what I do at Two Bear Capital, we are very much a national firm. It was always my dream to have a top tier firm based in Montana, looking outward as opposed to always looking inward. And Equity Capital is still very concentrated in just a few areas. But, and I know sometimes that my colleagues in San Diego and Boston and LA don't quite get me and what I do for the firm. But Mike is so insistent that being in this community imbues our firm with the kind of values that he wants to promote. And among our portfolio companies, while they may not be located here, we bring our team here once a year. And we are very committed to those values. I think Don's spot on that.
So if you get your crystal balls out, where would you like to see MWED and the Flathead in 25 years from now?
I know what I want.
What's that?
I want to see the Gateway West become this amazing hub for entrepreneurship and STEM education. Just a cutting edge place for rural America, small schools, best teachers. I'd like to see great lab space there. I'd like to see the community continue to move together to manage, not just growth, but the future. But we've really got to invest more in how we educate our young people and this all started in a way to try to keep people here having jobs. There are a million stories. I love the story of Shane Beams, who has Visionarial now in Belgrade. I remember Dennis Beams coming to me going, Shane wants to be a programmer. He said, is this tech thing going to stay? And I said, yes, it's going to stay. So he goes and does that, but then he goes back to college and gets a degree in electrical engineering, and he's employed 27 people now in Visionarial. They're raising an equity round. It took 15 years, but that's what it takes. And I just really, 25 years is a very short window. It really is. So that's one of the things that I think is really important. We don't need, tourists are going to come here. They will find us. I don't want us to spend a lot of money trying to get tourists here. And they're not the kind of jobs that, they're great summer jobs for college kids, but they're not good sustainable jobs for families. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, and from my standpoint, I look at economic development more as a process, not an event.
Yeah.
It's not a project that you do and it's done. It's more of a process. And so I guess my hope is that Montana West continues to evolve and change as the economy and the needs within the community change, but to be a strong, centralized point where people can come and then blossom out to all the different communities within the valley, and to try and develop businesses that are more eco-friendly, if you will, rather than the heavy manufacturing type jobs, more of the science, technology type of positions that Liz mentioned. I think that's a great opportunity for the valley because it's a beautiful place with many, many different recreational opportunities all year round. And if you can get people moving here or living here, making, really good wages, then they're out to the community markets, they're out hiking, biking, buying bikes. I mean, it's kind of a self-fulfilling.
It's a virtuous cycle. It's absolutely a virtuous cycle. Main Street's awesome, but Main Street's a follow-on business. It's your base businesses that really, drive that. And I think it's really exciting to see where the valley is now. Other than the number of traffic lights, there are a lot more traffic lights than there used to be.
I think there are probably more coming.
I can remember there was one. The traffic light at Reserve was the only light between Whitefish and here. It was like a 15-minute drive. Now it's not. Yeah. But I want to compliment you, Chris. You've done a great job and been a great leader. And really, it's very exciting for me to see where we started and where we're going.
On the shoulders of giants, as it were. Yeah, I can take very little credit for anything that was put in place long before me. But no, I agree. I think it's a really exciting time for the Valley, and there's a lot of change, which I know can be scary sometimes. But I think overall it's good change, and there's a lot of investment, and there's solid base growing with manufacturing, which is so the unsung hero of this valley, and technology and good jobs and good people moving here because they enjoy it and just want to make it better. Yeah. So, unless you have anything else to add, I really appreciate you guys taking the time this morning and all of the work that you've done over the last 25 years, both here and in your own jobs and roles out in the community. And I think we're better off because we have such a solid group of people here who are always willing to put in some work to make things better.
Yeah, well, thank you. It's been a pleasure. It's been fun.
Oh, it's been a lot of fun.
It has been. We've had some trials and tribulations, but
oh yes, we have.
What business or venture doesn't, right?
Absolutely.
Anyway, thank you for the opportunity to talk about it a little bit. It's
I like
brings
to hear the
back
stories.
some really good memories.
Awesome.
Camera off. Thanks. I've got more stories now.
Yeah, you go.